Alright, so I've been keeping up with the January 6th committee hearings that have been going on over the last week or so, and part of the reason why I haven't really been doing like day-to-day coverage on this on my channel is because, number one, I think that a lot of this is really just political theater, and I think that if you're going to do this type of a hearing, if you're going to bring all of this evidence to light, then you have to have some sort of a concrete plan in order to enforce accountability for those people who are responsible for the events of January 6th. And it seems like according to some recent information and statements that we got from members of the January 6th committee, that that is not something that they apparently are planning to do. So again, obviously January 6th, I think liberals, to some extent at least, overhype this and pretend as if it was like the worst thing that ever happened in the United States. On the other hand, you have conservatives basically trying to whitewash this and pretend as if it was just some type of like peaceful parade or a tour through the Capitol. So I think there's definitely a little bit of hysteria on both sides, but at the end of the day, these are fascists. Donald Trump is a fascist. The Republican Party is full of fascists, and so they are going to try something like this again if they get the opportunity to do so. And so again, the priority here should be what type of consequences can we put in place, in order to prevent them from feeling as though they are emboldened to try this again. But here we got from NBC News. They say, January 6th committee will not make any criminal referrals, the chairman says. You're not going to make any criminal referrals. Okay, I mean, understand, obviously it is the job of the Department of Justice to actually follow through on charges for people who were involved in this, but saying that you're not going to make any criminal referrals, well then what the fuck is the point of any of this? Just to talk about it, to bring it to the awareness of the American people? I mean, maybe you could make the argument that in a political sense that could have marginal benefits for Democrats, but I mean, really, you're kind of just undercutting the entire point of this if you're coming out here and publicly saying that, at the grand finale of these hearings, that there's not going to be any criminal referrals. But they give us a little bit more details here, saying the chair of the House committee investigating the Capitol riot said Monday night that the panel will not make any criminal referrals, even though its leaders have previously hinted at the possibility of doing so. And they got a quote here. They say, our job is to look at the facts and circumstances around January 6th, what caused it, and make recommendations after that, Chair Benny Thompson of Mississippi told reporters as he left the House chamber after the second day of public hearings by the panel. And they say, when pressed on the matter and whether the committee had ruled out the possibility of referring criminal charges, particularly for former President Donald Trump, Thompson replied, we don't have the authority. You don't have the authority? What the fuck does that mean? Of course you have the authority to make criminal referrals. Again, it's the job of the Department of Justice to actually follow through on that, but saying you don't have the authority, what are you talking about? They say, but the committee's Vice Chair Liz Cheney, an absolute ghoul, but she's doing, a semi-decent job during these trials, but still fuck Liz Cheney. But she suggested later on Monday that a decision was not yet final. So wait a minute, is it not yet final, or are you not going to be filing criminal referrals because you don't have the authority to do so? They continue here with a quote saying, the committee has not issued a conclusion regarding potential criminal referrals. We will announce a decision on that at an appropriate time, she said in a statement on Twitter. And we have even more contradictions here. Representative Elaine Loria from Virginia said in a separate statement that the committee has yet to vote on recommending criminal referrals and said, quote, if criminal activity occurred, it is our responsibility to report that activity to the Department of Justice. Well, the first quote that we just had there from Benny Thompson was that you guys do not have the authority to make these criminal referrals. And now we have somebody else who's also a member of this committee who's coming out and saying it's our responsibility to make these criminal referrals to the DOJ. So even the fact that there is like this confusion or that they're not all on the same page, that in and of itself is a problem with these committee hearings. But they continue here finally saying Representative Adam Schiff, one of the 3 California Democrats on the committee, also weighed in during a CNN interview on Monday when asked about Thompson's remarks, saying, quote, we haven't had a discussion about that. You haven't had a discussion about that? What the fuck? So I don't know that the committee has reached a position on whether we will make a criminal referral or what the referrals might be. I thought that we were deferring that decision until we concluded our investigation. So again, even the fact that there is confusion surrounding this, even the fact that there is some internal debate about what the inevitable finale of this is going to be, that in and of itself, you just completely undercut the entire point of this process, which is to prevent another January 6th from happening in the future. So y'all got to get your fucking acts together. But, obviously, according to all of these different conflicting statements that we've gotten from members of this committee, doesn't seem like they're all on the same page. So this is a massive problem. I think that they absolutely 100%, even if it's going to be a difficult thing to do, they should bring criminal referrals against Donald Trump, the rest of the Republicans in office and out of office who participated in doing this, if they committed crimes, which it definitely seems seems like there's enough evidence to say that they did. So, I mean, on that front, seems like this is just a complete failure in the coherence of what this committee's objective or goal is at the end of the day. But there still have been some pretty insane things that have been featured or semi-revealed. I mean, a lot of these things we kind of already knew going into this hearing, but we've learned some new stuff. So I just wanted to run through some of the biggest things that we've been talking about in relation to the January 6th committee. So one of the big things that they were focusing on, especially on the first day of these hearings, was the role of the fascist organizations of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and how thoroughly involved they were in, ushering people to the pressure points that they had pre-planned to go to on this day, ushering people there, encouraging them to break through police barricades, encouraging them to go in, encouraging chants of like hang Mike Pence and things like that. So it seems like at least we may have underestimated to some degree the role and the organizational capacity of a lot of these organizations that were involved on the ground on that day. Also, some potential connections between these organizations and members of Congress, which we also had this revelation that came out that members of Congress reportedly asked Trump for pardons after January 6th. So, I mean, again, if you're going and asking Donald Trump for a pardon in relation to the events of January 6th, seems like you're kind of admitting a little bit of guilt there, at least that you thought that there could potentially be some consequences for your actions in potentially, facilitating what happened on January 6th. So again, pretty big revelation here that we learned. Also, we've heard that the January 6th committee plans to ask Ginny Thomas, the wife of Justice Clarence Thomas, to testify. So I talked about this on my channel a couple different times, but this lady is absolutely a batshit lunatic. Okay, she's a full-on rotted brain QAnon supporter who was actively pushing her husband to try to overturn or to restrict the documents that were going to be released to the January 6th committee, which, by the way, those same documents implicated her in her own conversations with Mark Meadows and other members of Congress in efforts to try to overturn the election. So, the wife of a sitting Supreme Court justice who then used potentially his wife's advice to then vote against giving this information to the January 6th committee. I mean, you have, corruption, conflicts of interest up and down the chain, all the way up to the Supreme Court here. So I hope they do make her testify, because this would be an absolute shit show and it would be very entertaining and funny to watch. But this was another component that they were talking about. We also had some other crazy details that were talked about in this. One of them was that Trump was ready to seize voting machines using the US military. So, I mean, fuck. I mean, if they were literally planning on doing this, they were planning on sending the military out to go and seize these voting machines. Who knows what the hell they would have done with them if they had gotten their hands on them. But this was reportedly a plan that they were putting in place at the time. We also had this: Pence asked for help defending the Capitol while Trump did nothing. So this is pretty big just in terms of like, what was happening on that day. It seems like, according to the military, according to Mark Milley down here, that he was really treating Mike Pence more so as the president and literally taking orders from him, taking commands from him in terms of the response to the active insurrection that was going on at the Capitol building. It seems like the military was really treating Mike Pence more so as the president on that day and treating Donald Trump more so as like an active coup leader, essentially, as he was refusing to call the Department of Homeland Security, call in the National Guard, call the military, etc. So this was another pretty big, important revelation that we got from this. We also got this one. This actually came out a while ago, but they were just talking about it again, and it's just an absolutely insane piece of this. Here from the Rolling Stone, they say, Trump told staff that Mike Pence deserved to be hanged during the Capitol attack. So while this was going on, and after he found out that people were chanting outside to hang Mike Pence, he was literally telling members of his staff, well, maybe he deserves it. I mean, this is what Donald Trump was saying while this was actively going on. We know that he came out, he spoke out of both sides of his mouth as the insurrection was happening. He was obviously behind the scenes very happy about them storming the Capitol, and then he kind of, in a very half-assed way, was forced to make a response telling them to go home in peace, and talking about all of the love that his supporters were showing on that day after they just stormed the Capitol. But again, an absolutely wild piece of this: the President of the United States actively encouraging people to hang his own vice president for not following in his footsteps and overturning the election of Joe Biden, which he didn't even have the power to do anyways. On January 6th, what was happening was basically just a formality. It wasn't something where these people could have actually wielded legitimate power, but nonetheless, this was another piece of this. And finally, they say January 6th panel argues that Trump was involved in a criminal conspiracy to overturn the election. So, I mean, I don't understand how you can say that he was involved in a criminal conspiracy and then also come out and say that you're not going to be making criminal referrals to the Department of Justice. Seems like that's just kind of a, a contradiction at face value. But listen, again, I think that a lot of this is political theater. I think that a lot of it is also very important that we understand the full scope of exactly what went on that day, who was involved, which members of Congress, which, outside fascist organizations were pre-planning this, were involved in this, etc. So I do think that it's very important at some level, but it's really only important if you're going to bring consequences. I mean, if you're going to spend all of this time, all of this political capital involved in something like this, you have to make sure that you set the standard that if people are committing criminal conspiracy, like you say that Donald Trump was, and which I agree with, if you're going to come out and say that, then you have to set the precedent that committing criminal conspiracy is something that's going to get you actually prosecuted. And so, if they don't have any coherence within this committee, if they're not all on the same page, that's a big fucking problem, both in the immediate sense and also in the long-term sense in terms of what type of message that this sends for Republicans who potentially, or at least inevitably, are going to be trying to do some sort of a January 6th overthrow if they lose an election in the future.